and I think the world loved it, we all loved it, growth was okay. UPA 2 after the first year was an unmitigated disaster from the investment point of view. It spoiled the name of India because of corruption, because of all the scams, lack of decision making, the logjam, environmental issues, and the retrospective amendment. Of all these things, the retrospective amendment of tax was the highest insult to India, because it, the world stopped believing India and trusting India, because a country which goes back to 1961 and amends the law with retrospective impact, nobody could understand how it could work. How could you put a liability on somebody when there's no liability by a retrospective amendment of act of the law, and stand up before Parliament and say it's a sovereign right? There has to be sovereign restraint. Yes, we are sovereign, we can do what you want, but there has to be sovereign restraint. This is not the way to treat your own citizens and overseas investors and anybody else. So I think the UPA 2 was not a good time. We grew, yes, like Mr. Manu said, we grew, but I think the world lost its confidence because of all these issues. It did hurt India very, very much. And I remember I went to a pension fund conference where there was $14 trillion in the room. $14 trillion. I made a speech for India, asked them to invest. They all applauded, and they said, we won't come. I said, why? They said, how can we trust you when you go back to 1961 and amend the law? We don't trust you anymore. And that's the way the world is.
So let me, before I bring in Dr. Singhvi, who's raising his hand, I want to bring in Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat, therefore, in this context, would you say the Prime Minister has been disingenuous by using the phrase scam India, sir, when he's trying to convince investors and other elements of the Indian diaspora to try and build up the image of India?
You know, Rahul, I simply want to point out that we are in 2015. We are in the age of social media, and you and I know the kind of comments and commentaries that come on social media. I mean, each of us has been, if I may call it, the victim or whatever, or the object of several very unflattering comments, and that is par for the course. So my point is very simple. I've always been a little unhappy about the fact that in India, there was a kind of a ceasefire in which nobody really gave, any kind of expose or any kind of criticism almost of another VVIP. Now today we are becoming more like other democracies. VVIPs are attacking each other. They're using some pretty atrocious language, but they have the right as the citizens of India to use that language. So this is the language that frankly is used to you and me in social media by some individuals. You know that. So the fact is, Rahul, I think we should celebrate the fact that there is now a greater openness, that this kind of language is now there.
I wouldn't totally buy that point of view.
We cannot roll the clock back.
I wouldn't
this
endorse,
is the age of social
I wouldn't
media.
endorse invective.
This is the age of blunt comment,
no,
and it's there to
I
stay.
wouldn't, well, sir, not that one disregards your libertarianism, but to endorse
Rahul,
invective
you would
would
not
be
endorse
taking it a bit
invective,
far.
neither would I.
Okay.
But the fact is, it's part of everyday life.
Okay, I want to bring in Dr. Singhvi then. Dr. Singhvi, a personal anecdote by Mr. Pai proves the point the Prime Minister Modi made. Now you may have a quibble about the forum,
I am sorry,
but the facts are out there.
I am sorry that the very eminent panelists you have, and I respect all of them, have missed the point completely.
Okay.
This is not about democracy, libertarianism, freedom of speech. I am the first to say that I will defend to death Mr. Pai's or Mr. Nalapat's right or anybody else's right to criticize to the core anybody and everybody in India. That's freedom of speech. That's not the point at all of the debate. First of all, we can have a separate seminar and debate about what were goods and bads of the UPA 1 and 2. Every country has problems, and UPA 1 and 2 did have pluses and minuses. So that's the point Mr. Pai made. Secondly, and that includes the anecdote, we're not talking about economic policy here. And the point Mr. Nalapat made is freedom of speech, libertarianism. But the real point is not that at all. A simple point is, have you ever in your life, from Jawaharlal Nehru, Nelson Mandela, Obama, Clinton, Reagan, found any, or Hollande, or Margaret Thatcher coming to India and saying, prior to me, I am now going to try and do skill UK, prior to me was scam UK? Please answer that question. That's the issue in this program today.
I can answer that.
This program about this issue. This program is not about UPA 1 and 2 economic policies. It is not about democracy and freedom of speech. I am entitled to do anything in this country. Have you ever found a head of government, the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy, traveling to another country? Forget Mr. Modi. Please tell me Mr. Bush and Mr. Clinton were heavily opposed to each other.
Okay,
This French Prime Minister predecessor, has
Dr.
anybody
Singhvi,
come to a country and ever spoken
Mr.
this?
Kohli wants to
It is
respond.
disgusting and deplorable.
You made the
Deplorable.
point. You're repeating
It's not
yourself. Okay, Mr.
complicated.
Kohli.
Yeah, it's not complicated. First, these terms are commonplace. They've been commonplace for a long time, and they've been commonplace in the international fora. That's exactly what Mr. Pai has been saying. So the Prime Minister was not reiterating that the world did not know and the world hadn't spoken about it and had almost written off India as an investment destination. So that's one part of it. The second is, can we also look at the context? Where was Prime Minister Modi speaking? He was speaking to an Indian audience. He was speaking in Hindi. He was not sitting in a bilateral thing. So you are trying to not confuse foreign policy with an event that is not exactly foreign policy. It's engaging with Indians or people of Indian origin who are outside the country. And these kind of events have been taking place. Have you seen any of the other prime ministers or presidents that Dr. Singhvi named coming to say India and doing it for the Americans? If it were the American president, they don't want to do it. This is a separate thing. My last point is, does that take away Mr. Anand Sharma's exact comment of trying to call the Prime Minister mentally sick, or Mr. Ahmed Patel saying he's like Duryodhan, or like Mr. Digvijay Singh calling him Hitler and calling Osama bin Laden Osama ji and Masrat Alam as Masrat Alam Sahab. So you can't make a case of trying to run away from what the Congress party has done by seeking something from the BJP.
Divergence and digression will not help. Mr. Modi was not addressing a closed-door party BJP meeting, Hindi or English. He was speaking to an audience peppered with innumerable foreigners. Please don't forget that when he speaks at these diaspora meetings, the diaspora is there and there are thousands or hundreds of non-Indian, non-PIOs, non-NRIs. And Mr. Kohli and everybody in this program knows that very well. Every language he uses, any language, whether it be Turkish or Chinese, is translated. So don't go on language either. No Prime Minister or President of any country that I have known who is proud of his country or even who has had a bitter political battle and has come to power says this on foreign soil, report it to the whole world and see the vyang, the sarcasm with which he said it. Just play the tape again. You just played it at the beginning of the program. अब हम क्या कर रहे हैं? Skill India. अभी तक क्या था भारत का नाम? Scam India. Let's be real. Let's get real. This is not a program about criticism. This is a program about propriety, sense, dignity of office.
But
you
dignity.
know, Mr. Obama used to call
on that,
Manmohan Singh
no,
his guru.
So funny.
His guru every time.
Manmohan
Singh kept the dignity of office. He
when
did not
it comes
flaunt
to
it.
dignity,
He did not throw it away.
Well, then you
call
lost.
him his guru.
Well, then would you not concede,
Let's not
Dr.
be.
Singhvi? At least concede that you lost the dignity.
Then let me one point, please.
Okay,
Yes,
please.
One
Go
point,
ahead.
please.
Go ahead,
He's the
sir.
Prime Minister of India.
Go ahead, go ahead,
He's
go
not
ahead.
an
Talk about the
election rally for
dignity of the
BJP.
office.
He's not the
It's
Prime Minister
not-
of BJP.
No,
Please.
no.
Yeah.
No,
No, go ahead,
He's
go
a
ahead,
Prime
sir.
Minister who's come from the BJP, but he's the Prime Minister of India now.
We've got 1 minute on the show.
Coming back to the issue of dignity,
Yes.
it's fascinating that whether it's Dr. Manmohan Singh, Narasimha Rao, or the late Rajiv Gandhi, all three had questions about the dignity of office was raised on each one of them. One in coal scam, that's Dr. Manmohan Singh had to face summons, which may have been challenged now, but he has to face the summons. Before that, Narasimha Rao had to face trials, and late Rajiv Gandhi was, well, there was a commonplace knowledge about the Bofors thing. That whole thing comes from the task you do on it, and by ensuring that you're doing it in national interest. The fact that 2G, Colgate, all the scams took place, I just don't understand that which is known to the West, known to the East, known to every Indian, how can speaking or comment on that ever bring down the dignity of India? The change from that situation is restoring India's dignity.
Quick comments, sir. We need to wrap up after
So-called
this.
Rahul?
the so-called scams are errors in decision making, retrospectively held to be erroneous decision making. The so-called criminal part of criminal intent has been stayed by the Supreme Court. I don't see what basis Mr. Modi has to suggest clearly that India is a country of scams. I repeat, nobody is answering my basic point. No Prime Minister, head of government or head of state ever says this. Mr. Modi needs lessons in political maturity before he says this again.
No, what you
And I
do
hope
in
and
office
trust he
and
will
what
not
you
say,
say in office.
No, I don't accept
BJP
that. Just
is never
because,
going
Dr.
to,
Singhvi,
admit
just
it.
because Mr. Modi can speak extempo and speak and charm an audience out
Yes.
there and doesn't require a paper sheet or follow a model where the Prime Minister can't speak
Which is
unless
why he
he's
can say what he
authorized to
likes.
do so
Which is
from the
why he
party
can say what he
Mandarin.
likes.
That model is different. That model is different.
Which
That
is-
model is completely different.
which is why
2G
he will
was a
speak
reality.
first and think
The
later.
Supreme Court,
Which is
Supreme
why
Court
he speaks
struck
first
it down,
and think
Dr.
later.
Singhvi, just as you are taking the Supreme Court to stay Dr. Singh's warrant, summon, you can't exactly say that the 2G scam which was struck down by the Supreme Court. Nor can you ignore the fact that Colgate was struck down and 2 lakh crores have been raised from 20
There are
coal mines.
matters struck
So
down in
therefore,
every country in
that
the world.
these were
No
scams,
Prime
these
Minister
are not
goes and says
retrospective.
that because the court has struck down.
No, these are not retrospective errors in judgment.
Courts.
These have omissions and commissions which is clearly recognized by the highest court and therefore they were struck down.
Yes.
But should we be defensive?
I repeat,
Now I want to bring in Mr. Pai.
assuming
One second.
whatever you are saying is
Dr.
true,
D-
there is
Dr.
no
Singhvi-
country which will ever do this.
Dr. Singhvi, one second.
Self-flagellation
I want to
and
bring in Mr. Pai.
sadistic
Final
pleasure in
comments.
criticizing India.
There is
final
no
comments.
country in which a Prime Minister was
Demeaning
allowing
India.
such scams to take place. We
Well-
only hear that in banana
Well, I'm
republics,
glad-
not a full-fledged democracy
I'm-
like us, sir.
I-
I'm glad you are
one second.
defending.
One second.
One
I
minute.
need to
I'm
take-
sure Mr. Kohli's spirited defense of Prime Minister means that next time the Prime Minister will be going, I'm sure, next 2 weeks abroad, he will say the same thing again.
No,
Let
one
the
second.
BJP
I
endorse
just
it.
want to quickly
And let
go
the people
across
of
to
India
Mr. Pai.
judge.
Look, I'm
Let
wrapping
the
this
people
up.
of India judge.
Gentlemen, I'm wrapping this up. I just want to go quickly across to Mr. Pai and Professor Nalapat. Professor Nalapat and Mr. Pai, do you get a sense that the Congress is perhaps being a little defensive or overly defensive about an individual who perhaps in full possession of the facts, speaking from the office of a Prime Minister, is making a judgment call on a pretty well-known fact? Do you get that sense?
Well, Rahul, I'd like to point
Rahul,
out.
my opinion is, even if you disagree,
I'd like to point out.
That
Go
was
ahead,
for
go ahead,
Mr.
Doctor.
Pai. That was for Mr. Pai. I'll come back to you, sir. That was for Mr. Pai. And you have the last word, Professor Nalapat. Yes, Mr. Pai.
Rahul, I feel that even if you feel and get hurt by what the Prime Minister said, you should not take pot shots at the Prime Minister in India through various parties. And I think, you should be careful in your language. This Hitler thing has come about too many times. And I think the people who talk about Hitler have not read the history. They don't understand who Hitler is and what Hitler did, what power he enjoyed. There has been too much of loose comments about naming people. I think there should be a code of conduct for all political parties. All political parties, so the temperature comes down, they learn what to work. Look at how Parliament has become because of personal ideological hatreds. So I think we need to cool down, have a code of conduct.
Okay.
I don't think a wrong, another wrong, sets right.
Should this
what,
apply
somebody could
internationally,
perceive to be
Professor
wrong.
Nalapat?
So I
Should the
think we
code
need a
of conduct also apply internationally to foreign soil, foreign assignments?
Well, Rahul, on this point, I'd like to say that the BJP won the election largely on the issue of corruption, on the corruption charges against the UPA. So quite clearly the Congress party would not like that issue to once again revive itself in the public mind. The word scam indicates corruption. So the Prime Minister himself talking about scams in the context of the UPA, once again the public memory will again, there'll be a revival of the memory of these scams, which the Congress party doesn't want to happen because it wants to be on a comeback trail.
Wow.
And for that, it has got to go away from this kind of history. So there's a clear political reason why the Congress party is so upset and why the Congress party has responded in this manner.
Okay,
It presumably believes that with this kind of response,
Our viewers
the Prime
tonight-
Minister will not once again repeat this kind of situation.
Our
My
viewers
point as a
tonight have
citizen
had-
is that free debate is free debate. Whether you call libertarianism or freedom of speech, it's perfectly all right.
Okay, well, we know the views now of all our panelists on this particular question we threw up for debate. Our viewers are perhaps the best judge of who is right. We've been inviting comments on Twitter on the handle Duryodhan Mahabharata. Please do send in your messages to us. We'd like to go through some of them and get a sense of who you thought perhaps has taken the lead on this particular debate. We leave it at that. Lots more coming up in just a few moments. Very intriguingly, there seems to be now a stage set for a split in the Aam Aadmi Party. Will it actually happen? You'll find out.